Welcome to the breakout session, identifying and assessing the importance of engaging fathers with speaker Derrick Byrd. We are so glad you are here. My name is Princess Sanders, and I will be moderating today's session. I will be monitoring questions in the chat. And if you have any issues, you can send me a direct message through the Zoom chat. We ask that everyone stays on mute during the session unless you have questions or to participate in the conversation. This helps reduce background noise. We encourage you to be on video if you can, so we can see each other and build community. But if you are more comfortable or must be off video for children and other reasons, we understand. If you would like to read the transcript to see closed caption for this session, please click on the button that says CC Live Transcript. Then choose Show Subtitle. You can hide the subtitles by repeating this process. Please share your thoughts, questions, affirmations, or anything that is particularly interesting to you in the chat or through the reaction buttons. Now let me introduce Derrick Byrd. Derrick W. Byrd has served as an advocate for children and families for 42 years. Derrick has served in various leadership positions in many local, state, and national nonprofit organizations and governmental agencies. Derrick is the founding member and currently serves as an executive director of the Family Resource Center, South Atlantic. Derrick is one of the most highly inspirational and insightful speakers addressing a variety of topics, including family involvement and engagement, fatherhood initiatives, advocacy, racial disparities, and child welfare and child mental health and public education reform. Now I will turn this over to our presenter to start the session. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders, for that introduction, and welcome to everyone. As she stated before, I am Derrick Byrd, and I am the Executive Director of the Family Resource Center South Atlantic, which is a nonprofit organization based here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we serve a number of counties across North Carolina, and we provide a responsible fatherhood program, which I'll talk about a little later in the session. So we're here today to talk about father engagement, and I thought it was important as I was made aware of the Early Childhood Conference, and as we are engaged and involved in spaces where we're talking about families, we always want to lift up, again, the issue of fatherhood and engaging fathers. This has been a very important topic, particularly for myself as well as for our agency, as we have been involved in promoting responsible fatherhood for a number of years. And we hold an annual conference, which I'll allude to at the end of this presentation. But I thought it was very important that we have the conversation about fatherhood in the early childhood space. And because, again, we want it to be very clear that, you know, we want fathers and we want those who are engaging and or interacting with those who will become fathers or are in the process of becoming fathers to understand their role and to be supportive of their work, of their engagement from the very beginning. And of course, research has been very clear in the fact that children do well and and have very successful lives when they have had very engaged and involved fathers. So this is kind of what we are looking to talk about this morning. And I'm going to just really kind of just be talking about a number of different things. And again, really more so those barriers and why it's important to really address barriers. And I just really think that the speakers this morning very much were able to identify some of those barriers and the need for addressing things like equity and the need for addressing things like resilience And so this is going to be something that hopefully will be in line with what you've already heard this morning, as well as what you hopefully you will come out of this workshop and out of this conference being able to continue to do in the early childhood space. Oops, sorry. So what's special about father engagement? So again, there's a lot of research that proves opposite of what the narrative is about fathers and fathers' engagement and fathers' involvement. And I think, you know, one of the things that we want to think about is that we really need to begin to start changing the narrative about fathers. So there are very specific and important roles that fathers play in the involvement of their children. And so what we know to be very special about father engagement is that there's an opportunity for fathers to demonstrate to their children, particularly to male children, how male adults take responsibility, establish appropriate conduct, and just model adult male behavior. And again, that is important for that to happen. And it's important both not just to male children, but it's also important to female children as well, to really see, oh, I don't know what just happened, to see positive male behavior. What's special about father engagement is making choices and being able, again, for children to be able to make choices and see how choices are made with father's engagement, father involvement in those decision-making processes. Very important. This choices that are made from dads may be very different from choices that moms make. And so there is a balance that needs to be present for both, for the children to be able to glean from. Problem-solving abilities. Men solve problems differently, and it also helps to promote some increased curiosity and problem-solving capacity with children, so that there is, again, that resilience, as the last speaker just spoke of, that is gleaned from having those experiences of father engagement. Providing financial and emotional support, very, very important, again, as we think about the stability of the family and stability for children, that there is economic support that fathers play a very big role in, that influences the mental stability and the financial and social stability of their children. And also emotional support as well is very important. Highly involved fathers contribute to increased mental dexterity. I always have a problem with that word. And again, it's been proven, it has been researched, and it has been, as I would say, tried, tested, and found true, that there are always positive outcomes when fathers are engaged and involved with their children. And so this is not anything that's new. We don't talk enough about all of the good things that can occur and all of the benefits, positive benefits that happens when we are intentional about fathers being highly involved and engaged with their children and their families. So one of the things that we have paid attention to in our work is the North Carolina Early Childhood Action Plan that was developed a couple of years ago. And we're not that deep into the early childhood space. We do have a program where we go in and work with families who have children between the ages of 3 and 5 year olds. And so we get to interact with fathers at that level. So but that's just one of our programs. But we also recognize the space that we need to be in when it comes to early childhood education and early childhood development. And so we very much wanted to be a supporter and a contributor to this early childhood action plan that was developed. And we very much agree with the fact that, we in our work and what we know to be true is that these domains are very, very important if we're going to have healthy children in North Carolina. So, I mean, healthy children, when we talk about healthy babies, preventative health services, food security, all are very important. We also, when we talk about safe and nurtured, that they are safe and secure housing, safe and nurturing relationships, which is where we do a lot of our work in permanent families for children and call foster care and social emotional health and resilience. And then of course, learning and ready to succeed is again, we very much work in that domain in our agency as well. But one of the things that I have always found very interesting in this work, and not just in the early childhood realm, is that, when we talk about, child wellness and child positive outcomes for children, that there's always, we talk about families and we always have a very different definition of what family is. And then as we kind of break that down, we always seem to have an absence of including fathers in that conversation when we are referring to families in that sense. But I want very clearly for people to understand that there are very much in these four domains, the importance, again, as I spoke about, what is special about father engagement is that father engagement are characterized in three different areas. And so the first area is interaction, and interacting directly with the child in the context of caretaking, play, and leisure. And as you think about how interaction will play a part in this wheel on every domain that is listed, again, that's why it is important for fathers to be engaged. And there is such a thing as fathering. There's mothering, and then there's fathering. And I think we tend to always dilute the role that fathers do play and the importance of it, and that there are two very distinctive, different parenting styles in co-parenting. And so there is fathering and there is mothering. And so part of fathering is interaction. The second part is accessibility, being physically and psychologically available. Again, how does this align and impact this wheel? Very important. So when we talk about the early childhood space, we want all parents, but particularly we want fathers to be interactive and accessible. And then lastly, we want fathers to be responsive, have some responsibility for the child's welfare and care. And so again, it is important that we include in the conversation and make sure that it is intentional, that when we speak of families and when we speak of child wellness, that we make sure that fathers and fatherhood is in the conversation and part of the response and part of the plan in engaging them. One of the curriculums that we promote and provide in our Responsible Fatherhood program is 24/7 STADS. And it is a evidence-based curriculum that is highly used in various programs that are working with fathers. And just in general, these are some of the topics. There's 12 sessions, and just in general, there are specific topics, again, that speaks to all of the things that happen and should happen in the early childhood space. We talk about family history, because again, we want to be able to talk about where and how do people learn how to parent? What has been your experience? Who modeled for you, parenting, and particularly dads. And oftentimes when you look at how dads have been absent in the home, oftentimes what we hear in our workshops with fathers is that they said that they didn't have a role model. Either their dad wasn't consistently in the home or was absent, so they didn't have anybody to model after. So we talk about their family history. We talk about the need for men to pay attention to their health, and why it's important for men to be able to be healthy and to promote health and wellness, just for them, not just for themselves, but also for their children and for their families. Their role, again, as fathers, and what does that mean? Again, the fathering aspect of parenting. What is appropriate discipline? And discipline and punishment meaning two different things. We also go through child development. So fathers have an understanding of the different stages of child development so that they can be able to support all of those different stages and understand all of those different stages that children go through in those developments. The big piece, working with mom and co-parenting, I will probably tell you that 85 to 90% of the issues that we always have with dads outside of child support has always been about co-parenting with mom. And so that there is a real disconnect sometimes between mom and dad around, parenting. And so, we really work with we work with the dads to be able to identify ways that they can better work and communicate with mom around co-parenting. And so what we recognize in that aspect as well in these last 5-6 years that we've been really doing this work is that we need to have mom in the room as well. So we're getting ready to do a co-parenting component to our fatherhood program. And we also have the opportunity to the National Fatherhood Institute that also created the 24/7 Dad curriculum, has a curriculum called Understanding Dad that is specific for moms, because moms need to, again, understand what role and the benefits dad play in that home. And when it comes to children's development and being able to raise healthy children. And of course, communication is very important. Communication with mom, communication with their children, communication in general with anybody. So we help dads really unpack a lot of these things in this curriculum. And again, these topics very much align and support the early childhood plan for North Carolina. So we think about and we talk about, identifying barriers to engaging identifying barriers to engaging fathers. And, as families in this conference and service providers or whoever, or who again are taking and need to take an advocacy role in this work, it's important that you kind of understand, get proximate to the problem as to why there may be, what are those barriers that may be happening or challenging for dads to really be fully engaged in the early childhood realm and just in general with children. So just some very key observations. And one observation is that we must assess our own beliefs and practices. So again, having been in the space where I have been, I've worked in social service field for over 40 years, have been in various different groups and community programs and all kinds of things where either I was the only male in the room, or that there was a very distinctly, there was some opinions about why men should or should not be engaged or involved in a particular program or service. And so we have to assess our own beliefs and practices. And so again, it goes back to what I mentioned earlier, is that we need to change the narrative about fathers in general. And even before we talk about changing the narrative of fathers, we just need to change our narrative, change the narrative and attitudes about men in general. And if I'm going to even get close deeper than that, we need to change the narrative and the attitudes about Black and people and men of color, because that's one of the big barriers right there. So we have to really assess our own beliefs and practices and what has been those stories that we have carried generationally about roles that men should play in the family, or just men in general, or fathers in general, what we've been heard, what we've been told, what's been promoted, that fathers just don't want to be involved, fathers just don't want to be engaged, and things of that sort. And that, that's farther from the truth, but we continually perpetrate a lot of those misconceptions about fathers and men in general. Father engagement will be impossible if we don't examine our systems that impact families, specifically families of color. I think the first speaker spoke this morning, spoke very eloquently to this. So again, I think we have to think about, the systems and how systems have played a role in the lack of father engagement and father involvement in our families. And I think we have to be willing to tell us, just really accept the truth about what that looks like and how it has happened. And one of the things that we always talk about in our work in equity is that that there's racial inequities in every system, across every system. So if you look at the child welfare system, there's inequities. If you look at the law enforcement and the court system and the criminal justice system, there are inequities. If you look at the health system, there are inequities. So there is not a system that does not have inequitable situations happening, particularly for people of color or particularly for men of color. And that any system that men have been involved with necessarily has not always meant a positive outcome, or there's guaranteed that there won't be a positive outcome. So we have to look at the systems that are continually making it difficult for fathers and particularly men of color to be fully engaged and involved in their families. We must be willing to invest socially, emotionally, and financially in this work. So, what we have seen and what we have been promoting, not promoting, but what we have been advocating against is that engaging fathers and working with fathers has to be something that you have to fully invest in. It can't just be, oh, well, we're doing this, but we'll just, do something for dad over here. Oh yeah, we forgot we need to, do something, and we'll just throw this little program, or we'll just, send this or do this. It's always an afterthought. If you're going to be fully invested in making sure that fathers are engaged and involved, that you have to be fully invested in that socially, you have to be fully invested in that emotionally. So again, goes back to our own beliefs and practices, and there has to be sufficient funding or it has to be financially supported in a manner that truly has some significance to the work that you're doing with dads. There has to be a common working definition that defines father engagement, because everybody has a different definition of what that looks like. So that's the first thing that needs to happen, is that there needs to be a common understanding of what is father engagement and what does that look like. One of the things that we started to do a few years back, actually prior to the pandemic, was that we was working with a senator at the North Carolina General Assembly to introduce a bill to establish a fatherhood commission here in North Carolina. There are already commissions in several other states across the country, and we really felt that it was something that was needed here in North Carolina. And one of the issues that we came across in working with the senator in the General Assembly around this, was that there was a different definition of what father engagement looked like. And not just with the senator, but among his colleagues, because he came back to us and said, well, I've talked to some of my other colleagues here in the General Assembly, and there doesn't seem to be a consensus around what does that look like and why we need to have a fatherhood commission. So we knew that we had to really go back and really figure out, what is a common or working definition that everybody can really feed into as it relates to fatherhood and father engagement. Father engagement is synonymous with diversity, equity, inclusion. So diversity, equity, inclusion is the new Kool-Aid of the month. Everybody's is on that bandwagon, even more so now than they had been maybe 10 years ago. Not to say that it wasn't always important or prominent, but that, we are seeing much more work around diversity, equity, inclusion. And fatherhood is a diversity, equity, and inclusion issue. It is a social justice issue. And I think we need to really take it and categorize it as such. Because when we talk about inclusion, how often are fathers included in decision-making processes where there are services and programs? sitting at the table where policies are being developed. Where is the fathers are they being included? Equity. So we want fathers to have the same opportunities as moms have when it comes to supports and services. We're not saying that we want equality, but we want things to be, we want to have access to the same things, but we need for them to fit our particular needs and how we want things and how we need to be able to be engaged in that manner.
Mr. Byrd,
yes.
you have hands up in your audience.
Okay, I'm going to ask Princess if she can monitor that for me because I can't see that.
I know you can't see it, so that's why I'm saying that, because you have questions in your chat and you also have hands up in your audience.
Okay, all right. Princess, can you monitor that for me? And I don't know if I have questions at the end. I could either wait. I'll let the people can tell me if you want to ask questions now or wait to the end. I can address all of those. What's the will of the people? Does it matter? I guess it doesn't matter. I'm not hearing anybody. Okay. So let me get to the questions at the end. I think that will make it helpful. So just put them in the chat, and then we can go through the questions at the end. Kelly, did you have anything? Did you have a question, or did you have something you want to say? Or can it wait till the end? Because I see Kelly's hand up, but okay, I'll just keep going. Oops. All right. So yeah, so as I was saying, so we want things to be equitable, not necessarily equal to the programs and services that are designed for moms in general. And again, it is a diversity issue. How we frame the problem and who we frame as the problem will determine our outcomes. It's important to understand how we frame the problem and who we frame as the problem. Oftentimes, you often are looking at whether then, fathers tend to generally be framed as the problem when they're not involved or absent or just not particularly engaged in with families or with children. But we really need to dig a little deeper as to, why is that? And what really is the problem? What are the root causes of the problem? If we look at behaviors, which may not necessarily always be the problem. There is no single role fathers should aspire to or be assigned to. So, we always have a predetermined role that we want fathers to play. We want fathers to just, bring home the bread, be the financial supporter. We want fathers to do this, but there really should not be any role that fathers should just be assigned to or that they should just be aspired to. They should be able to, they can be nurturers, they should be able to do all the things for children, for families that anybody else can do. So we don't want to continually put fathers in a box or just assign them to this role, and that's the only role we want them to play. When they don't play that role, then we have an issue. Language and terminologies are exclusive. So when we look at all types of things, particularly in the social service realm or in other systems where we are using language or terminology, sometimes that is exclusive. I had somebody to ask me one time, this is when I was working in Child Protective Services, why are the case files always listed in the mother's name, even if father's in the home? And I really couldn't answer that because, again, that's just how the system had been set up. But I thought that was a real good question, because again, if father's in the home and is considered the head of the household, then when we open a case up for services, when that family comes to present themselves for services, the case is always put in mom's name. I have never had a case that we put in dad's name and dad was fully engaged and involved front and center. It always went into mom's name. So again, how exclusive can we all, we are in systems? I thought this was a great quote. Anyone who knows Lily Tomlin, I may be telling my age. But I thought this was a great quote when she said, I always wondered why somebody doesn't do something about that. Then I realized I was somebody. And I think we have to begin to take more responsibility of ourselves in making sure that these things, that when we talk about just fathers and father engagement in general, it's not for fathers. It's not just fathers that should be supporting and advocating for that, but everybody should be advocating for that. That should be everybody's business to make sure that those things and anything else that needs to happen in assuring, child wellness and safety is done by everybody and not waiting for somebody else to do it. We are the somebodies. So I want you just to take a couple of seconds. I want you in the chat to just list 3 systems that help men function better as fathers. I just want to know if you can identify 3 community systems that help men function better function better as fathers. And just put that in the chat, and we can, if Princess, if you can just kind of tell me what's in the chat, that would be great. Three community systems that help men function better as fathers. If you don't want to put in chat, you can unmute yourself and just tell us what the systems are.
Derrick, is this proper or in local communities?
Is this where?
Is this proper or in local communities?
Either one.
Okay.
So I see sports, I see church, all pro dads in school. Okay, yep. Head Start, Boys and Girls Club. Parks and Rec. Okay. Triple P. Right. Okay, great. So I think, as we are identifying, these community systems, we recognize that there are, again, some aspects of some of this work that are happening in various different entities within our communities. And many times, we want to make sure that that programs are accessible and, again, very specific to what men need. And so, we may not have, every dad may not be a part of a church or a sports program or, other things. So, we want to make sure that there are some real accessible types of events or outlets, that are available to men. Now, I would tell you, and even President Obama, back when he, in his first term, recognized the fact that particularly in communities of color or Black communities, often men have these conversations in barbershops. So that's a community system, that helps men function better as fathers. And one of the things that we do as a pre-conference event, again, that I'll talk about shortly, is that we do barbershop buzz every year. And we've been doing it now this will be our 9th year, where we actually go into barbershops in various parts of either Wake County or Durham and some other areas. We're kind of branching out now. But we go into barbershops on a Saturday morning. We always take the Saturday after Mother's Day, and we go and we have facilitated conversations with the men who are sitting in the barbershop around fatherhood or any other issues that are related or important to the men or to fathers in general. And we always have, I mean, it's always been something that we look forward to, because again, it gives us the opportunity to reach those who may not sign up for a program, you know, or may not even come to a conference. But again, it's an opportunity to get them engaged and have them to think about, you know, how they can, you know, how they are processing and unpacking things that they are experiencing, and what is available for them to be able to access if they need to get some additional resources or support. And so we always enjoy doing those types of things. So that, you know, so those kind of out of the box types of things, again, that needs to be considered when we're talking about father engagement. So some other possible reasons why fathers are not engaged. So we look at institutional practices. When I worked in child welfare, one of the things that we had to do we were mandated to ensure that fathers were involved in any case that we opened if we got a report. And so what happens oftentimes, and not necessarily always in the child welfare realm, is that, you know, when you're working with families, and if dad, for whatever reason, is not in the home, and you ask, well, where's dad, or where can we find dad? How involved is dad in? Do we have to rely on the information that's provided to us by mom? And so oftentimes, mom may tell you where dad is or how engaged dad is, and then sometimes she may not. And we took that at face value. And so what we had to do, again, is we had to change our belief system, and we had to kind of, you know, regroup and say, well, we just can't rest on that. We have to actually do our due diligence to find and engage dad in this work. And we began to do that. We asked staff, and oftentimes in our social services realm, you know, the workers are pretty much 80% women. So we have to also look at, well, what baggage is women coming to the workspace about men or about fathers? And we were very surprised how truthful some of our female staff were about, you know, their unwillingness or what was uncomfortable for them in working with men. And again, it goes back to those narratives and all those experiences that they may have had with their own dads or with other men, that just kind of bleeds into the work. So there are a lot of institutional practices that are barriers. Not knowing what to do. Nobody really, you know, it's almost as if, you know, men and fathers in general are just aliens. We just don't, you know, we don't know how to work with them. We don't know what they like. We don't know, you know, what we can do for them, you know. Well, once you engage folks and you ask them, it's pretty easy, because it's not that difficult. But again, not knowing what to do. So what we do, since we don't know what to do, we don't do anything. You know, again, staff attitudes and biases. Again, changing those narratives. Language, cultural, and gender norms. We also have to take into account, you know, what are those cultural and gender norms just within families themselves. You know, men in some cultural situations, you know, you can own, the men are the only ones that you can talk with as it relates to the family. And not mom, or, you know, so there are a lot of different language or cultural gender norms that we also need to take into consideration. Organization institutions appear punitive to fathers. And I think we have to really think about, you know, well, we have to think about, we really need to again, tell the truth and shame the devil, that oftentimes when you look at systems, you know, the systems that men engage in are not necessarily systems that are there to support them. And men always believe and have the perception, if they have not already experienced, that getting involved or being engaged in systems will be more punitive than helpful in a lot of different areas. Service accessibility. So a lot of our services, a lot of resources or things that can be very helpful and beneficial to dads happen before, happen after 8 and until 5. And so we want them to be the breadwinners. We want them to be financially responsible and provide this financial stability for families. We can't expect them to be off work or to take, or not be at work to engage in the service at 10 or at 2 in the afternoon. So we don't make services very accessible to fathers at all. And then again, we just ignore or not, or they're just non-existent. It's just not an afterthought. It's an afterthought. When we are being, when we are looking at, providing services and making policies and things that so, we don't necessarily always have fathers or men generally in that mind frame. So we talk about this whole concept of gatekeepers, and what are gatekeepers? Gatekeepers are those individuals that you think about again, and you see the picture of the velvet rope, and if you've been in situations where, you have somebody who's standing behind the rope and they decide who gets in and who doesn't, and we have gatekeepers throughout all of our systems and in families. We have gatekeepers who basically are those who can grant access to information, can grant access and to opportunities, to resources. And so those are the ones basically who define the rules. They can hide the rules, and they control the resources. And so these gatekeepers are very much engaged and involved with, with men every day. And I would tell you who are the worst gatekeepers. First and foremost, mothers are the worst gatekeepers. All right. And so again, there's always a lot of ambivalence or, again, this determining, what the assigned role for fathers to play. And that's where they want to keep them at. So we want to make sure that they are full partners in this work and that they can be engaged in every aspect of the child and then the family. So mothers are big gatekeepers. Again, institutions and organizations, big gatekeepers, okay? Children can be big gatekeepers. And I always tell this story, I am a father too. Well, they're old now, they're in their 20s, but when they were younger, and when I would always get all of these, they would come home with, flyers and announcements, and I always would get the McDonald's nights and the Chick-fil-A nights flyers. But when it was parent-teacher night and other things or curriculum night, I didn't get those flyers. Those flyers weeks later would be in the bottom of their book bag as we clean out book bags. I'd be like, okay, well, why didn't you give me that? And they just kind of look at me because again, they were gatekeepers. They knew, well, if we don't tell dad about this, then he won't go. But, they made sure I went to Chick-fil-A and McDonald's night because that more benefited them. And, but, those just examples of, how children can be big gatekeepers. So how do we look at getting ourselves ready to really make this paradigm shift around engaging dads and being more assertive in taking on that leadership and that organizing around making sure that dads are engaged? So we always tell organizations they need to do some sort of an organizational self-assessment. We do this in our practitioner summit with organizations and community groups often that want to engage and want to learn how to better involve fathers in general. And so, one of the things that we want organizations to understand that they really have to do an internal check and look at what are their practices that may be excluding fathers or may have some very unintentional outcomes when it comes to working with dads or engaging dads. And so there are a number of tools out there that helps organizations to really do that type of self-assessment. But we also tell them that, whatever tool, if it's not the one that we recommend, that if whatever you choose to do, that it needs to make sure that you're covering these 7 domains. And so the first one is, you want to make sure that, what is your philosophy? What is the organization's beliefs or philosophy around working with fathers? And so if you have, all of these very elaborate, we work with families, we're family centered, we're this and we're that. Well, what does that mean? And where does fathers fit in all of that? So you have to kind of walk, you got to have to really just, call a thing and just say, this is what we're about. And this is how we're going to work with dads. What is your physical environment like? So a lot of offices, a lot of places, may not be very welcoming to dads. So you need to think about, how does your physical environment impact or would be welcoming to dads in that sense? What are your policies and procedures, again, that may be exclusive to dads? How are you orientating and training your staff? And again, how are you making staff and holding staff accountability for working with fathers in that space? What is your program content? What is your program content? So if you're developing program, or if you have program, how are you ensuring that dads are inclusive or are able to access that programming content that you're developing? What is your marketing strategies? Are you constantly putting out images that are more geared to attracting mom, or are they also geared to attracting fathers as well? And your outreach efforts, where are your outreach? You really have to kind of go where dads are, where men are. You can't just think that they would typically be in places where moms or women in general will be. You have to also go where dads and men will gravitate to. So we just kind of again talk about all of these other things that can be done to help to be more inclusive of dads, or having systems, and some of these, not just necessarily institutions or organizations. I think these are some things that families themselves can also think about. How can I make sure that the father of my children, or fathers in my family, are also being included and inclusive as well in this realm. And so again, just think about some other components that can be engaging to fathers, training parenting skills that are specific to fathering. Every parenting education program may not necessarily always speak to, the father or father's role. So if that's what you're engaged in, or that's what you're providing, you need to make sure that, again, looking at program content, what could you do to enhance that parenting education program to make sure that they're also speaking specifically to some of the things that are around fathering. What we have found, relationship skill training, men, will gravitate to things like that. Education, job skills training, legal services, that's a big one. Peer support groups, we do a peer support group every 4th Thursday of the month. And, this is, again, an opportunity and a safe space for men to be able to talk about things that they're experiencing or needing to unpack, not just also as fathers, but just primarily as men. And I think we need to always think first and foremost that fathers are men first, and men have issues. So we have to really think about that first. So again, just kind of as I end, our program here at the Family Resource Center is our Day-to-Day Dads program. We've been doing this program since 2016. We have served over 900 dads across Wake and Durham counties and some other counties across North Carolina. So we use the 24/7 dad curriculum. We also work with dads who are incarcerated or have just been recently released from incarceration. So we have the Inside Out Dad curriculum, which is a companion curriculum to 24/7 dads. We help them with job search and education. We help them with navigating the child support and visitation system. and we give them success coaching. We used to call it case management, and then we found out real quickly that men did not like to be considered having having a case or being managed. So we changed it to success coaching, and that seems to kind of did the trick. As I stated before, we sponsored a North Carolina Fatherhood Conference. We started in 2013. The only year we didn't get a chance to do the Fatherhood Conference was in 2020 at the height of the pandemic. Last year it was virtual. This year we're going back in person on Saturday, June 18th, 2021 here at the McKimmon Center in Raleigh. We have had 500 to 600 men in attendance every year. Since 2013, we started 2013, we had 300. And then at 2015, and from there on, we were getting 500 to 600 men across the country, across the state every year to this conference. Again, it's an opportunity to bring men together. It's an opportunity to promote fatherhood. There are workshops, there are vendors. I mean, it's an experience that men always seem to enjoy and want to be a part of. And I don't know what else to say. It's always been a great opportunity, again, for us and for the community to again talk about father engagement and the importance of fatherhood. And one of the other activities that is a pre-conference event to the Fatherhood Conference is the Strengthen Fatherhood Power Breakfast. So this is an opportunity for us to really engage our elected leaders, people who sit in institutions and agencies that make decisions. And so we talk about the institutional impact of fatherhood. And we've been doing this breakfast now for about 7 years. And we always have a number of people, elected leaders from General Assembly and all kinds of department heads and other folks who come and have a conversation and have a clear, concise, and consistent conversation about why it's important to promote fatherhood. What are those institutional impacts that men and fathers in general are experiencing, and how can we change that narrative and change those things that are happening to fatherhood so that we can better promote and be inclusive of fathers across North Carolina. All right, so now hopefully I left some time for questions.
Thank you, Derrick, for that presentation, and thank you all for being here and for your participation. We are going to take a quick break before the next breakout sessions. Before we do, please take a moment to complete our checkout survey. Your feedback is very important. The checkout is very short and should take you no more than 30 seconds to complete. Everyone who completes this checkout at the end of each session will be entered into a raffle to receive one of additional $100 stipends we're offering. I am putting a link in the session checkout in the chat. Please complete it before you leave this session. And if you have any additional questions, you can put those in the chat as well so that Mr. Byrd can further assist with those questions.
Can I go ahead and answer some questions now?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to try to go through the chat right quick. So Ms. Dennis asked, can you share if you have any existing relationships with Head Start and North Carolina Pre-K? So yes, we have in the past and have worked with the Head Start programs locally in some of our areas. We would really love to have a partnership with the Head Start Association or with Head Starts across North Carolina because we understand and we want to support the father engagement, father involvement work that Head Start is doing. So we have had some contact and partnerships with local Head Starts, but I would like for us to really do more. Let me see if there's any more questions. How do we get fathers to be around? Well, again, I think that was from Miss Creasy. So, like I said, there has to be, and first and foremost, you have to make sure that you have the right beliefs and perceptions about working with fathers, and then you have to fully be socially, emotionally, and financially committed to having fathers, to working with fathers and having fathers engaged. And then I think secondly, once you do that, then you have to recruit fathers who will help you recruit other fathers. So I think, what we have found is that, and like I have programs in our programs and our staffing initially, 80% of the staff were male. And so what we recognize is that men will talk to other men, not necessarily will talk to women, but about, about fatherhood types of things or just men types of things. But the initial engagement needs to really happen, that transfer or that warm transfer needs to happen with other fathers or with other men. So I think that would be the best way to do that. First of all, you got to make sure you have the mindset, the prepared mindset to do that, and then recruit men who will be able to access those spaces for you to be able to engage and work with other men. I'm going through the chat. Well, if you have a question, you can just raise your hand or unmute yourself right quick. We still have a couple more minutes.
I would like to ask a question.
Yes.
I mentioned that I agree that mothers can be gatekeepers more often than anyone else. And I see where Mr. Spencer said that it should be time for negative consequence. It should be time for consequences for negative gatekeeping. I agree with that. I also agree that there are times when gatekeeping is a matter of safety. And so my specific question was, what do you see as creating a culture of safety for children when you are dealing with fathers and how fathers interact with their children and work throughout their environments? Because typically gatekeeping has to do, as a mom personally, with making sure children are safe and not put in unsafe circumstances.
So are you saying being unsafe with dad?
Yeah, specifically being unsafe with dad, but still realizing that fathers are necessary and that co-parenting is most likely the best option for children, making sure children can still be safe.
Yeah, I would agree. I think first and foremost, you always want to ensure, the safety of the children. And I think if there's a parent that for whatever reason is exhibiting behaviors that may put children at risk, then you have to take whatever necessary precautions that that is necessary. I think, there are some like there's a program here, it's the Triangle Family Services. They have a program where there's some supervised visitation that you can take advantage of, so that, again, you want to see and assure that there are some ways that dad can still be engaged with his children, but you want to do it in a safe space. And so I know Triangle Family Services has a supervised visitation program where, they will be able to have dad there and supervise the visitation with dad, so that this way dad will still be able to have some contact and interact with his children, but it's done in a manner that is safe, and mom don't have to be there. So mom drops the children off. There's a staff person that will monitor that visit, and then when that visit is over, then mom can pick up the children. And doesn't necessarily always have to mean that the parents have to have contact. I think you just have to find those resources out there that will still allow for dad to be engaged, but also that safety is also addressed. Anybody else with questions?
Yes, one question that I have is that what I've seen is, like, growing up, my father actually raised me. So he was the primary caregiver, and then his mom assisted him. And I remember growing up, and it was, if he would go to school and try to advocate for services for me, you know, especially in education, it was like he wasn't listened to, or he was considered aggressive. And it ended up to the point where I actually didn't receive services from a learning disability until my senior year in high school, because of the fact, and I could, like, it's a processing issue. So it's literally, I had the words and they would have me just build something instead of write it out. And he finally was like, no, she's going to college. She's got to be able to communicate and it written, you know, and write it out. And it's just, I saw him struggle, and like he would go and go. And it was almost to the point where he got labeled as this aggressive male when he wasn't aggressive. He was just trying to advocate for his child. And then luckily I was in a Girl Scouts group, so like he could talk to some of the other dads and moms, you know, and they were like, no, we don't have those issues, we'll just send you know, because my wife does this. And I feel like sometimes that needs to be an awareness that's made, because now I even see it happening to my own husband. When there's a concern with our child, the teachers will tell him, oh, the child's had a wonderful day at school. And then 2 hours later, I get a dojo message that says, oh, well, your son didn't have the best day today. And my husband's kind of like, well, why didn't the teacher tell me that when we were face to face? You know, so I do think that that's something that happens for men, is that automatically they're seen as aggressors, and they're not.
Okay, and again, it goes back to those that narrative, those perceptions, and again those gatekeeping characteristics. Yeah, I was in PTA for a very long time, and I often heard those issues, and always had to go in and advocate for those kind of dads. You know, that this is not about being aggressive or assertive. I mean, they should be engaged and involved and welcomed to be part of those decision-making processes. And I was always the dad that was in those meetings. And you know, but unfortunately I had the relationships where, you know, I wasn't necessarily labeled that way. But when I said I wanted something to happen, I meant for something to happen. So, and so I didn't, you know, so they may have said that behind my back, but I mean, I didn't really have those issues. Anybody else? I think we're kind of at our
Mr.
end.
Byrd, can I
I'll be
also
around.
add, can I add to your comment? We also see it in early childhood when we're trying to enter males into the realm of working with children. So, you know, we definitely see that gatekeeping. So we have this bias of men who want to work with children are predators, or
Right.
We're questioning their sexuality. And there are great, amazing individuals who want to work with our children, but our profession, because predominantly is female, we put those invisible gates up that prohibit males from working with children, but also as the young lady was speaking prior, we push fathers back out the door. We push males back out the door when they want to be involved and engaged.
Right, right. You know, or we assign them to roles. Like in PTA,
Yes.
you know, we were working very hard to have units to, you know, engage dads and come up with, you know, male engagement, male involvement committees. And then so what they would do, they would have us do the barbecue at the spring fair. Or we would go paint the wall, or we would, you know,
Put the mulch down on the playground.
Yeah, and I finally had to say, you know, I hire people to do that for me. I'm not doing that. I mean, there's some other things that I can contribute other than, you know, putting a nail in the wall or paint or you know, barbecuing hot dogs and hamburgers. But again, that was the mindset that people had, that this is the role that men can play. And say that we're engaged with our fathers, you know, with our children in school. No, so we had to change those narratives, definitely. Kelly, your hand is still up. I don't know if you had a question.
No, I don't know how. I'm trying to figure out how to take it down. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I think, you know, we're past the 11:45 hour. I do want to thank all of you for your participation and your attendance, and I hope this has been very helpful. I will put my name in the chat and contact information if anybody is interested in contacting me around this issue.